Just generally speaking, like if someone wants to look for a therapist, like how should they go about that?
It's a great question. So I'm going to reserve my answers for primarily the US, because systems are a little bit different in in um, in other parts of the world. So the first question in the United States is, do you have insurance or do you not have insurance? So if you do have insurance, uh, so that's a big dividing line. But the first thing that you can do is, if you have any kind of doctor, like if you have a general practitioner or a primary care physician, you can ask them for like mental health support or evaluation or referral. So you can say, hey, I'm concerned I may be depressed, and I was wondering like if you had any recommendations for like how I could get evaluated or if I could see someone. So start with your doctor, because it's their job to like connect you to appropriate care. Second thing is, so if you have insurance, you can actually contact your insurance company and say, hey, I'm interested in finding a mental health provider. Can I have a list of people in my area who provide therapy? And then your insurance company will give you like literally a list. Nowadays, like insurance companies have largely moved online. So you may just be able to search, like you log into your like online insurance account and then you can search. And so you can find providers who take your insurance. If you find a provider who takes your insurance, the insurance will cover most of it. And then you may have to pay anywhere between like a $15 and $50 copay, depending on the particular provider. And then your insurance company will pay them anywhere between $100 and $300 per visit, and then you'll pay like 15 to 50. So those are the two simplest ways. A couple of things that are really good now is that you can search. There are websites like Psychology Today is a good example. Zen Care is another one that's like in a few U.S. cities, that you can search for therapists like in your area, and then you can see their profiles. You can see what they specialize in. You can oftentimes also search based on like whether they take insurance or they don't take insurance. So you can kind of find a provider that way. If you don't have insurance, a couple of things that you can do is you can like just put in your location, like in Google, and type in community mental health center. So community mental health centers provide services for people who otherwise can't afford them. They get like federal or state funding to provide a necessary service, and they can actually get compensated for seeing you despite you not having insurance. So they can oftentimes provide a lot of free care. The other thing that community mental health centers can do is help you get insurance. So they can even walk you through the process of getting like some kind of insurance that may not cost you anything. Um, so you can get like state Medicaid or things like that. Um, so, and the last thing that you can do is, even if you don't have insurance, you can just ask providers if they have any like free care slots available. So about 50 to 70% of the people that I see in my practice, I don't charge money for historically. Um, and so, I think a lot of providers, thankfully, are, that we're in it to help people. So we are, okay sometimes taking people who can't pay if we feel like we can really help them and things like that. So I don't think, most providers don't have that percentage, but most providers will have, a few slots open for people at reduced fees or no fees. Um, so that's what I would say. The next thing is that I would recommend that people don't just see one person. So if you do have the resources or availability, you actually schedule like 3 appointments with 3 different people, like 2 weeks apart. And then what you do is like you try, like if the first person you don't like, you like see the second person. And if you don't like the second person, then you see the third person. Then you kind of pick your favorite. But if you like the first person and it felt like a good fit and you feel like you can talk to them, you can cancel the other appointments. But I think a lot of times people will judge therapy as a whole based on an individual provider. And case in point, you can't really judge haircuts based on a particular haircut. Like it takes a while to find like a good place where you like getting your haircut. It can take a while to find your favorite restaurant. And so you can't judge all sushi based on one sushi restaurant. There are different kinds of sushi restaurants. So therapy is the same way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of building off on that, how do you know if a therapist is like good for you? Like, is there stuff you can look out for?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is like, do you feel like the person understands you? And do you guys have like a good talking relationship? Do you feel like you could come back and talk to this person for like the next couple of months, like once a week? Or do you feel like they, if it felt, yeah, that's really the biggest thing. It's not about their background, it's not about their degree, it's not about where they trained. It's like, can I actually sit with this person in a room for 1 hour a week for like somewhere between 3 to 6 months? And if the answer is yes, then go for it.
Like, why 3 to 6 months?
Well, that's kind of the minimum, but like the idea is that you should have a sense that you can come back and see this person over and over again. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if there was like any like statistics you're pulling from, or if it's more just a long-term relationship that you can build, sort of.
Yeah, it's more about that.
Okay, cool. Is there like certain kinds of therapy that you should look out for, or like does it depend on the problem?
Uh, so I think you should try a couple of things. So some kinds of therapy are very, very different. So a good like kind of like division is there's a branch of therapy that's called like based on something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a therapy that's sort of like very kind of like rigorous and kind of like it's almost more like engineering or scientific. So they try to help you understand the relationship between your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. So cognitive behavioral therapists will give you like exercises and like lots of kind of stuff to think about and do. Cognitive behavioral therapy is like it's more active. Um, and it's not just like sort of talking about your feelings. The other big branch of psychotherapy is like psychodynamic psychotherapy, which is like talking about your feelings. So it's a little bit more free form. It can sometimes take a little bit longer to like get to the good stuff. But like I think the question is like, do you want something that's more structured? Are you someone that like approaches therapy and says, in 16 weeks, I want my social anxiety to be like better to the point where I can go out and I can actually engage with people without being like anxious all the time? Or are you someone that wants to understand like the roots of your problem and like are willing to invest more time? So it's kind of like, are you like root focused or result focused? And those are the two big divisions, at least, how I'm setting them aside right now in therapy. Is like CBT is like very results focused, very sort of like Western in its approach. It's like, let's go for outcomes, let's go for like improvement in particular things. Psychodynamic therapy is like, let's help you understand yourself and let's help you understand like your patterns and things like that. Those are the big divisions. I mean, there are lots of other kinds, but
All right, awesome. So when people generally go to a therapist if they feel like something is wrong, so I guess let me even back up before that. So it's like a sign that you have cancer is like a lump, or if you have the flu, you have a cough. Is there stuff that you can look out for that would kind of say you should go to a therapist?
yeah. So that's a great question. So let's start by remembering that going to a therapist is not about treating something, it's about getting something checked out, right? So if you have a lump, it doesn't mean you have cancer. It just means that you should get someone who knows to take a look at it so that they can tell you whether it's cancer or not cancer. So I would say therapy is the same way. So if you don't know, like if you're feeling sad or down every day, or you're having trouble getting stuck, like feeling stuck in life, and you don't know, is it just because I'm lazy or could I have like clinical depression? That's when you should go see someone because it's not your job to know, it's their job to tell you and figure it out and help you out. So the first thing to understand is that I think generally speaking, people should have a very low threshold to go and see a therapist for an evaluation or psychiatrist. In fact, I think it's like, I honestly think that everyone in our community could benefit from a mental health evaluation. It's almost like an annual physical. Just go get checked out. Now, So that I think sort of answers your question. The second part is like, when do you know if you really need to talk to someone? And I'd say that like if you're suffering or struggling or you feel like you're not able to do what you should be doing, then I think that's another reason to get an evaluation. So in psychiatry, what we look at is impairment of function. So how do I decide if someone is depressed or sad? Like as a psychiatrist, what I look at is their sadness interfering with their ability to function? Are they not able to work? Are they not able to do school? Or like, is school significantly impacted? Is work significantly impacted? Are they not able to maintain relationships? And so function is impacted, then you should definitely go see someone.
Okay, cool. So like if someone, this gets kind of confusing just because it's like you can feel depressed without being like having the clinical depression, right? But if you think or if you have an inkling that you have like depression, you should probably go get checked out, right?
Right. You should just go get evaluated. Right? It's just like a lump that needs to be looked at by a doctor.
Going along with that, if someone is resistant to going to therapy, do you think that's a sign or how would you interpret that?
I think that's a question about why they're resistant to going for therapy. Right? So like what makes you hesitant to go? That's worth exploring. So there can be all kinds of answers. Is it because you don't think there's anything wrong with you? Is it because you don't think it's going to help? Like you're hopeless? Is it because you don't think it's going to work? Is it because of the label? Is it because you don't want to get prescribed medication or you don't want to be like, dependent on something for the rest of your life? It can also be because you want to do it on your own, right? So some people are like, yeah, I want to conquer this problem on my own. I don't want anyone's help. I want to do it my way and I want to do it by myself. So can be all kinds of reasons. So I think you should look at those.
Is there anything you think a person could do in terms of like labels or judgments? Because if someone feels there's a stigma to going to therapy, like, but I don't know how else to explain it, but they may benefit from it. Like, how could they overcome that?
So if you're talking about overcoming stigma, I think like the biggest source of overcoming that is experience, right? So like you should be a critical thinker about your own beliefs and ask yourself, why do I have these perceptions of therapy or psychiatry? And then you should try it. It's kind of like, yeah, like it's kind of like people, I mean, I know most people eat sushi now, but like, when I was growing up, like not many people, at least in East Texas, like ate sushi. They thought the thought of eating raw fish was disgusting. Because it's like, you go to the grocery store and you see like the fish counter and like you like, I'm not gonna eat that raw. Like you gotta cook that. And so like, how do you get someone to try sushi? Like you have to get them to try it once. And then like if they try sushi, then like most people eat sushi after they try it. And they're like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And so I think the biggest thing to overcome stigma is to understand like why do you feel that way? And what's the harm in like actually trying it before you make a judgment. And that's really what overcomes stigma is actual experience.
Another thing people are saying about hesitant to therapy is money. I was wondering if you like had any resources or ways around that.
Yeah,
Um,
so this is why I think like organizations like Rise Above the Disorder are fantastic. So RAD is actually committed to delivering mental health services to our community in spite of people's like inability to pay. So they're a nonprofit, they get funded actually by the industry. I think Riot Games gave them like a gigantic pile of money. And so, there are organizations out there that are committed to helping you. So you can check out RAD. The other thing is that if you're a student, oftentimes you have a student mental health clinic or like you have, university health services. If you're like a high school student, if you have like a school counselor, like so your school will actually provide stuff for you. Um, and like I said earlier, like community mental health centers will usually provide free services to people. And then the last thing you can do is send emails to people and basically kind of beg. It can be a little bit humiliating, but you can say, hey, I'd really like to work with you. If you find a profile that you like, I'd really like to work with you. I don't think I can afford your rates. Is there any option? And sometimes people will say, yeah. Even on the therapy websites, you'll see that like they have an option for sliding scale. So some therapists will even like check a box that says, yeah, I do a sliding scale. And sliding scale means that they'll charge you like something along the lines of what you can afford.
And another interesting thing was you said the like kind of like the DIY. I kind of want to get more of your thoughts about that. Like people who want to kind of DIY mental health.
Yeah, so I think that that's reasonable, but you should still probably get evaluated. So I don't think that mental health is all mental illness that requires treatment. So there are lots of stories and people, myself included, that changed a lot of their mental health through practices that were not treatment. And so I think that that's okay. But like, I think that the real question there about DIY is like, can you afford to take the time to figure things out? And what are the consequences if you fail? So when I really think about mental health services and when not to do it DIY, it really depends on time. So if I have like a sophomore in like, let's say college, and like they're struggling with depression, I would try to get them in treatment fast. Because if they fuck around for a year and their depression causes them to like fail a few classes, that can alter their trajectory for the rest of their life. It can affect chances to get into grad school. It can affect job prospects and things like that. So depending on the consequences. But I do think that sort of like, so I think it's worthwhile to get evaluated and see if you actually have like a clinical thing, and then let the psychiatrist or therapist weigh in about like, whether treatment is necessary or not. So I have a lot of people who come to me and they say like, I don't want medications. And I'll say, okay, I think they'll help you. But if you don't want it, what I'll do is come up with a plan for them. And I'll be like, okay, like let's set some targets. So I'm going to teach you how to meditate. We're going to talk once a week. We're going to track these particular things. And if by a certain time you don't see a certain kind of improvement, then I'd like to talk to you about medications again. And so the DIY route, I'd sort of think about it like that. Like think about it like, what's your target and when are you expecting results by? And if you don't see those, then you should really think about getting help. And then the other thing about DIY is I'd go ahead and get evaluated and make sure that it's safe for you to like not, to avoid treatment for some amount of time or delay treatment.
Another thing people were saying in terms of resistance to going to therapy is they just feel like hopeless. It's not like they're suicidal, but they just don't. They just feel like everything is a waste of time. There's like no point in living. How would you even begin to, if you're that person, help themselves, or if you know them, like help them?
So that's kind of hard, right? Because what I actually do with those people is not something that I can advise on stream. So what I actually do with those people is like, you talk to them about why things are hopeless, and like you don't try to convince them otherwise. You actually like try to see their hopelessness for what it is and meet them where they're at. And then together you try to work with them to see if there's like any road forward, which I know is like, so that's like, so people think that what we do on stream is therapy, and like what I actually do in therapy is like quite different. And so it's actually meeting people where they're at, which is like, okay, if you feel like your life is hopeless, like tell me about that. Let's talk about why your life is hopeless. And then you don't disagree with anything that they say, and then you see like after they've laid out why things are hopeless, is there anything left that's worth exploring? And that's usually what works. But I think that that's a very difficult process to do on your own, because generally speaking, if you had like most people who are hopeless weren't born that way. Their hopelessness comes from having hope, trying something, and getting shot down. and then trying something else and getting shot down again. Trying the third thing, the fourth thing, the fifth thing, the sixth thing, the seventh thing, and getting shot down 7, 8, 9, 10 times, 11 times, 12 times. And so it's really hard to ask someone on their own who's been shot down so many times to try to find hope. And so if, like, all you know is failure, then like it's hard for you to by yourself kind of come out of that. So I guess what I would tell those people is understand that like that's your experience, but other people may be able to help you with that. Because at the end of the day, like the problem for people who are hopeless is that they've been living their lives on their own. And like it can really help to have, you're playing a multiplayer game single player. Like it's kind of like you can get an NPC henchman that can supplement your weaknesses, and you would be amazed at what you can accomplish. Right? It's like if you're playing like a fighter or a rogue and you have like a dedicated healer just like sitting there like casting buffs on you, like you can do a lot better at life. And so it's not wrong for the rogue to think that they're going to fail because they just keep on wiping. Like you can go into a raid boss as a single person and wipe over and over and over and over and over again. And then you can logically conclude there's no way, like this boss is OP, the game is broken. But like get a healer and then try.
What's interesting about that analogy is someone just said use people, but it's like it's a mutually beneficial thing, right?
Sure. I mean, generally speaking, they get compensated, right? So you're not using them. There's an exchange. But sometimes they don't get compensated, and that's okay too. Right? As long as like as long as both parties are aware of what's going on. So like when I do see like a free care patient, like I know they're not paying me. They know they're not paying me. That's cool. Go for it, bro. No problem with that. As long as both sides are aware. I think using people sounds like manipulative because I think there's a lack of transparency. But I think if someone, how can I say this? Like if you've got a flat tire on the side of the road and someone like pulls over and they try to help you with your flat tire, there's no confusion that this is a one-way relationship that's not going to be compensated, which is fine. You could say that you're using them to help you with your flat tire. But as long as you're transparent from the beginning, I think that's fine. People, it's okay to like have a one-way relationship that's not even. Using people implies that it's manipulative or you're like have an ulterior motive. So that's happened to me too, where people will tell me, yeah, no, like I can pay you, and then they won't pay me. That's different. I'd be like, just tell me you can't pay me and I would have been fine with it. But it sucks to tell me that you can pay me and then like you don't pay me. I don't know if that was too far.
No, I think that explains it. Switching gears a little bit, I was wondering if there's any limitations to therapy, or like, I'll start there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest limitation to therapy is not going to fix you. So like therapy is like, like the healer and rogue analogy. Like the healer's there to heal you, but like you still have to do the DPS. The healer's not going to down the raid boss for you. Healer's just going to heal you. You still got to do the work. So a lot of people come to therapy thinking that if I show up here for 1 hour a week for the next 6 months, my problems will be solved. Not how it works. The patients that have benefited the most from my therapy are the ones that do the work between our sessions. And for that, it's like, I'm telling you guys, it's night and day. So, the biggest limitation of therapy is it's not like another medical treatment where like you go to, let's say, if you like have appendicitis, you go into the hospital, they like literally remove your appendix and then you leave the next day. And the problem is fixed. You're done. That's how Western medicine works. It's like my arteries are clogged. You don't have to worry about exercise. Just come into the hospital. We'll take a vein from your leg. We'll graft it onto your heart. And you'll be good. So Western medicine is very much, and this is the relationship that we have with our providers, is like all about, I'm going to show up, my doctor is going to fix things for me, and then I'm going to leave. It's kind of like a mechanic for the body. But therapy is not like that. So if you're showing up expecting to be fixed by your therapist, you're not going to get much help. You got to do your part. That's the biggest limitation of therapy.
And then, so I guess you kind of already answered the question, but more specifically, are there any other common problems with therapy, like that people face? And there's a little bit of a caveat, but like your thoughts first.
Are there yeah, I think there are a lot of problems with therapy as a field, but I don't know if that's like about people. Like people common problems that people, let me think about that. Yeah, so one thought that I would have is that if you're doing therapy for a while and it doesn't feel like it's working or helping, then consider finding a different therapist. And the other problem, I guess, with therapy is kind of contrary to that, is that sometimes it can be hard to see change. So change over therapy happens slowly and you don't really notice it. So it's kind of like you wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror every morning and you look the same as you did the day before, but then you look at a picture of yourself 5 years ago and you look like a completely different person. So therapy is the same way, where you can like, it can feel like a problem. It can feel like you're not making any progress, even though you are, which can be part of the problem. But yeah, so I'd say that's another, just a caution about therapy more so than a limitation, is that you may not be able to see the progress, but it could be happening.
Gotcha. Okay. So, like, are there signs when you should end therapy then?
Yeah, when you're feeling better or you're ready to
Okay.
move on.
Easy.
Yeah, I know it sounds weird, but like, trust yourselves, guys. Like, how do you know when it's like when you're done playing a video game? Like, how do you know? Right? Like, so I know a lot of people feel like they're never done. We can make lots of jokes, but like, how do you know when you're like done for like? How do you know when you're ready to play a new game? Like, how do you know that? You just know. Like, this shit's boring now. Let me try something else. So with therapy, like, you'll know, and your therapist will know too, right? Because they're going to be tracking things for you, and it's kind of like. So I have this conversation with people where sometimes they come in with depression. We work on the depression for a while. Then one day they come in, and then we're like, okay, so like, things are pretty good. And then it's like, okay, so now we're sort of done with depression. Is there something else you want to work on? So like, that phase of therapy is over. And then like, there could be like another phase, which is actually for me more like coaching. So I usually have like, I'm a psychiatrist first, and then I move into coaching, which is what I really like doing. It is not treating something that's broken. It's like helping people like find meaning and purpose in life. But anyway, sorry for going off topic there.
Oh, should you change therapists based off of tackling different issues?
That's probably something you should talk about with your therapist. So some therapists specialize in different kinds of things, and I think it's reasonable to find a different therapist for a different kind of issue. And at the same time, I would just talk to them about it and see what they say. Be like, hey, I'd like to work on this. Is this something that you think we can work on together? Or would should I try to find a different kind of therapist?
So, like, a lot of it comes down to just like being honest and talk about things you want to talk about with the therapist, right? Because it's kind of weird because I would see how people would want to hold back on saying stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Absolutely. So I think the thing that y'all need to remember about your therapist is that you can tell them pretty much anything. And it's actually like, the cool thing about it is it's like the one space where you get to say things that you normally don't say. And I don't mean like racial slurs, but like what I mean is you can go into your therapist's office for the first time, sit down and say, "Hey, I really don't want to be here." That's going to be the first words out of your mouth. I don't think this is going to work. I think this is a waste of my time. I want to be able to do it myself. I think what you guys do is a crock of shit, and I don't want to be here. And that would be the best thing you can say to your therapist. Your therapist will be overjoyed. You can say, hey, I don't think this is working. I'm bored. I've been doing this for a few months and I don't feel like I'm making any progress. All good stuff. Completely fine to say.
Oh, what should you do in your first session?
What should you do in your first session?
Yeah.
You should walk into your therapist's office and ask them that. That's what you should do.
Okay. A lot of these questions seem like questions you should ask your therapist. Like, should religion be used in therapy?
I mean, it can be. So I tend to have a pretty spiritual approach to the kind of therapy that I do. So much so that one of my supervisors one of my therapy supervisors once fired me, sort of. And she was like, I don't know what this guy is doing, but it's not therapy. He's talking about a lot of shit that I don't understand, and it's not therapy. So, I mean, I think you can have religion and spirituality can definitely have a place in therapy. But that's sort of dependent on the person and dependent on the therapist. I tend to bake a lot of it in but then I also ask people for permission. So I'll be like, I sort of have a spiritual background. Like, is it okay if I like include that in the way that I talk to you? Generally speaking, though, most people come to me because they're looking for that. And this is why we have websites and profiles so that people can pick what they're looking for.
I don't know how to like put this in a question, but can you address the I need Dr. K kind of type requests that people are like, you are the only one who will like help?
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask permission to play a clip for you guys from someone. So there was so I do coaching, and we also have coaching groups, right? So you guys can sign up, and depending on the roll of the dice, you can get paired with different people. So I run a group, and the group ended recently, and so we were just kind of offering feedback about the end of the group. And I couldn't have said it better myself, but one person was like, I came to this group because I thought Dr. K was the only one that could help me. Like, I was convinced that he was the only one, and he understood me so well, and he's the only one that could help me. After 16 weeks of working with Dr. K, I realized that I never needed him. And that like really what I needed, like the only person I needed was myself. And that's the truth. And that's like the best feedback that I could get. Is everyone has this perception that what you guys need is me, but like that's y'all don't need me. It's kind of like just because you watch a cooking show and there's like an amazing, like there's an amazing 5-star chef or whatever who's like making this food. Like sure that dude makes delicious food, but there's like delicious food all over the place. I know that a lot of people feel like I'm the only one for them, and believe me, it's flattering, but I think you guys don't know me as well as I do. And I think you'd be surprised at what you're capable of is if you put your mind to it and work with just any like really any therapist. It's about what you guys put in, not about what we put in. The last thing that I want to say, I'm going to read something to you guys. Okay. So there's a post on our subreddit right now that says today's chat with Zach and his father, Dave, is probably the most incredible thing Healthy Gamer has ever done. So I want you guys to think about this for a second. What makes that incredible? Because it's not me, right? So like I'm the constant in Healthy Gamer, but what makes that so impactful is like Zach and Dave. Like, sure, I'm the common element, but if you really think about it, like why are like the reason that some things are impactful and other things are not impactful, if it was me, then everything we would do would be like equally impactful. But it's not. It's the person who comes on that makes things impactful or not impactful. That's where the money is. That's where the value is. The real value comes from you. You just think it comes from me because you always see my face. But if you really think about it, the bulk of healing doesn't come from me. It comes from the people who come on stream. It comes from you. And so for those of you who think that you need Dr. K, like I don't doubt that I could help you. But I really am like not that special. The thing is, I mean, I fail too. And what causes me to fail or succeed depends on the person sitting across from me, because I can't fix them. They have to fix themselves. I'm just going to help them. And so the real thing that you need for your success is not me, is you. If you show up and you give it your best effort with a therapist, I think you're going to do a good job. And that's what we hear from people, right? Like even Zach on Wednesday's stream was like, yeah, I started seeing a therapist and I've gotten a little bit better. Turns out he's probably gotten a lot better. But like he didn't need me. Like I don't think any of y'all need me specifically. I know it sounds weird, but the real money is on you. I mean, it's like there's no. I mean, that doesn't. It's just how it is.
So, like, kind of going along with it, it feels like people think there's almost a skill gap within therapy, but it's more about the person undergoing therapy, right?
There's a skill gap. I mean, there can be a skill gap in therapy, though, right? So let's be fair. So just like any profession, there are good therapists and there are shitty therapists. I think the money though is that like even if you guys get like let's think about healers, right? Like there's an amazing healer in an MMO, and then there are shitty healers in MMOs. But most healers do a pretty good job. They do like good enough. And that's what I think therapy is. Like most therapists are good enough. And that's really all you guys need, because this is where like you have to think about how fucked up are you. We have a disagreement about how much y'all suck at life. I actually have a lot of faith that most of y'all are pretty decent, awesome human beings who are smart and capable, and all you need is a little bit of help. So I think you guys could have an average or above average therapist and you'd get a lot out of it, because I have faith in our community. And if you sucked, then maybe you would need a great therapist, maybe. But I think you guys are actually like pretty good. And so you just need like a basic healer. You don't need like a platinum healer. You just need like a silver healer. And y'all will do good. Just give them a shot.
Like a healer off of Craigslist.
Absolutely. Right? Because y'all
maybe not that actually. No, don't do that. Don't go on Craigslist to look for a therapist. Actually.
Yeah, but like seriously, y'all can carry that shit. You don't need a therapist to carry anything. Seriously.